The world's economy runs on a global chessboard, but instead of kings, queens, and knights, the pieces are cargo ships, oil tankers, and the invisible routes connecting continents. Every movement along these routes has consequences. A delayed shipment in Asia can cause shortages in Europe. A blocked tanker in the Middle East can spike fuel prices in the United States. Every day, billions of dollars move across these oceans, and control over them equals enormous power. Right now, the rules of this game are changing. Tensions between the United States and its allies on one side, and the growing China-Russia alliance on the other, are escalating in ways that go far beyond politics. This is no longer just speeches, sanctions, or headlines. It's showing up where it really counts, the arteries of global trade. For decades, the West has dominated these maritime lifelines. Strategic choke points like the Strait of Malacca and the Suez Canal are closely monitored, heavily patrolled, and critical to global commerce. The U.S. Navy and its allies have maintained a firm grip on these routes, giving them extraordinary leverage over nations dependent on international trade. But now, a question that was rarely asked is forcing its way into strategy rooms around the world. What if a route existed that completely bypassed Western-controlled waters? A path that is shorter, safer, and free from traditional naval oversight. A route that could reshape trade, power, and influence without firing a single shot. This is not a distant fantasy. The route is real, and the moves being made today could redraw the map of global commerce, challenging decades of Western maritime dominance. The chessboard is set, the pieces are moving, and the next chapter in global trade is unfolding in the icy waters of the Arctic. Global trade isn't just about ships sailing from point A to point B. It relies on a handful of critical choke points, narrow straits, canals, and ports where the world's economy can literally be bottlenecked. The Strait of Malacca, between Malaysia and Indonesia, is one of the busiest shipping lanes on the planet. Roughly a third of global trade passes through it, including almost 60% of China's oil imports. The Suez Canal, a shortcut connecting Europe and Asia, handles billions of dollars in trade every day. Control over these points isn't just strategic, it's power, and that power is overwhelmingly in the hands of the United States and its allies. Naval bases in Singapore, Japan, and the Indian Ocean give the U.S. Navy the ability to monitor, influence, and, if necessary, block traffic through these choke points. In theory, these waters could be shut down or heavily restricted during geopolitical crises, giving the West enormous leverage over nations that rely on maritime trade. For China and Russia, this isn't just an inconvenience, it's a vulnerability. In a conflict or serious diplomatic standoff, critical shipments could be delayed, rerouted, or stopped entirely. This reliance on Western-controlled routes is a problem with real economic and strategic consequences. It's this problem that has pushed China and Russia to think differently. Instead of competing directly against Western naval power in contested waters, they've been looking for an alternative, a way to move goods, energy, and resources outside the control of U.S. and allied fleets. What they've discovered is a new kind of opportunity, one hidden in the frozen north, the Arctic. The Arctic has long been dismissed as a frozen wasteland, too cold, too remote, and too dangerous for serious trade. But that perception is changing fast. Melting ice, rising temperatures, and advanced technology are transforming the region into a potential superhighway for global commerce. Enter the Arctic Express No. 1. A trade route that could bypass the Western-controlled choke points of the Malacca Strait and the Suez Canal entirely. This isn't just about moving containers faster, it's about reshaping power on a global scale. By opening a corridor through the Arctic, China and Russia could create a route free from U.S. naval oversight, congestion, and even piracy risks in southern waters. Think of it as a shortcut across a frozen highway, one that's slowly becoming navigable thanks to climate change. For decades, such an idea was considered impossible. Today it's real, and it's backed by billions in investment, icebreaker fleets, and advanced logistics planning. This Arctic route is more than a commercial project. It's a geopolitical statement. It signals that global trade doesn't have to run through traditional Western-controlled corridors, and that the rules of commerce can be rewritten in favor of those bold enough to navigate the ice. The frozen north, once seen as a dead end, is now the center of a new global strategy, one that combines history, ambition, and technology in a way the world hasn't seen in centuries. The idea of an Arctic trade route isn't new. European explorers in the 1500s were obsessed with finding a shortcut to Asia through the icy north, known as the Northeast Passage. England, the Netherlands, and Russia all sent ships into the frozen waters, hoping to reach China without sailing around Africa. Most never returned. Ships were crushed by ice, crews were lost to storms, and the dream seemed impossible. For centuries, the Arctic was considered too harsh, too unpredictable, and too distant to matter. But that centuries-old ambition never truly disappeared. Today, technology, warming temperatures, and geopolitical necessity are reviving that dream with a modern twist. The stakes are no longer spices or silk, they are energy, resources, and global influence. Just as explorers once risked everything to map unknown waters, China and Russia are now charting a modern Arctic corridor. This isn't adventure for adventure's sake, it's high-stakes strategy. What was once a deadly gamble is now a calculated move, combining history's bold vision with modern engineering and diplomacy. By looking to the past, we can see the roots of today's Arctic Express, a centuries-old dream finally meeting the conditions to become reality. The Arctic Express isn't a spontaneous idea, it's the product of deliberate, high-level planning. Back in the 2010s, as relations between the West and the China-Russia axis cooled, the two nations began exploring closer cooperation in the Arctic. This effort culminated in 2017 with the creation of the Arctic Waterway Cooperation Subcommittee, which is a formal framework to develop shipping routes, ports, and infrastructure along the northern coast of Russia. China linked this initiative to its broader Belt and Road strategy, branding the corridor the Ice Silk Road. Unlike earlier Belt and Road projects, which focused on railways, highways, and ports in warmer regions, this northern route relies on icebreakers, Arctic-capable cargo ships, and cutting-edge navigation technology. The goal is clear: create an alternative trade artery outside the Western sphere, giving China and Russia unprecedented control over logistics, resources, and energy flows. This partnership is strategic, not accidental. It combines Russia's Arctic expertise, fleet of icebreakers, and territorial control with China's shipping capacity, technology, and industrial demand. Together, they are transforming a previously impossible Arctic dream into a practical, scalable route that could rival the Suez or Panama Canals. In short, the Arctic Silk Road isn't just about trade, it's a joint geopolitical maneuver designed to challenge decades of Western dominance and open a new chapter in global commerce. The Arctic Express isn't a single stretch of water. It's a carefully engineered corridor divided into three main segments, each with its own challenges and advantages. First, the land route. Goods start in Moscow and travel roughly 1,200 kilometers by rail or road to the Arctic port of Arkhangelsk. This old Soviet-era port, once underused, is being revitalized as a major hub for northern logistics. Rail and road networks connect factories, warehouses, and ships, forming the first link in the Arctic chain. Second, the sea route, or the Northeast Passage. From Arkhangelsk, cargo ships head east along the northern coast of Russia, hugging Siberia's frozen shores. This segment covers around 5,600 kilometers and relies heavily on icebreakers and satellite navigation to safely navigate seasonal ice. Compared to traditional southern routes, it avoids congested ports and gives China and Russia more control over the shipping environment. Third, the Pacific route. After passing through the Bering Strait, ships enter the Pacific Ocean and head south to Chinese industrial ports like Shanghai, Qingdao, or Tianjin. This segment covers roughly 6,600 kilometers, connecting Arctic waters directly to China's manufacturing heartlands. Compared to the traditional route through the Suez Canal and the Indian Ocean, which is over 20,000 kilometers from Europe to China, the Arctic Express shortens the journey to about 13,200 kilometers. That's nearly 8,000 kilometers saved, plus 2 weeks or more in shipping time. Breaking down the route like this shows why the Arctic Express is more than a concept. It's a viable, calculated alternative that combines land, sea, and technology to create a fast, controlled, and strategic trade corridor. Not all Arctic routes are created equal. While there are several potential paths through the north, the Northeast Passage stands out as the most practical and strategic option for China and Russia. The Northwest Passage, which cuts through Canada's Arctic islands, might seem like a shortcut, but it's politically complicated. Canada claims sovereignty over much of the route, making large-scale commercial shipping tricky and subject to heavy regulation. The Central Arctic route, a straight line over the North Pole, remains mostly theoretical. Thick, unpredictable ice still makes it unsafe for regular use, even with advanced icebreakers. The Northeast Passage, on the other hand, runs along Russia's northern coastline. Russia has full sovereignty over these waters, meaning China and Russia can develop ports, deploy icebreakers, and control the corridor without relying on third-party nations. Seasonal accessibility is increasingly viable thanks to climate change, and the route is shorter and safer than traditional southern paths through the Suez Canal or Malacca Strait. This combination of political control, technical feasibility, and navigable geography makes the Northeast Passage the logical choice. It's not just a trade route, it's a strategic corridor that allows China and Russia to bypass Western-dominated seas while maintaining security and operational control. Choosing the Northeast Passage isn't just about efficiency. It's about turning geography into power, setting the stage for a new era of Arctic trade dominance. Climate change is often talked about as a global threat, but in the Arctic, it's also creating a new opportunity. Rising temperatures are shrinking sea ice, opening windows of navigable waters that were once locked in ice year-round. For the Northeast Passage, this means that parts of the route are now ice-free for several weeks in summer, allowing cargo ships to sail with minimal icebreaker support. But it's not entirely predictable. Ice conditions can change rapidly. A sudden freeze, storm, or unexpected ice flow can trap ships for days or even weeks. Seasonal variability remains a risk, requiring constant satellite monitoring, icebreaker support, and highly trained crews. Environmental regulations and concerns also add complexity, as Arctic ecosystems are fragile and global scrutiny is high. At the same time, this melting ice is creating a rare economic and strategic advantage. Shorter distances, fewer choke points, and minimal piracy risk make the Arctic corridor highly attractive to shippers seeking faster, safer, and more controlled routes. China and Russia are leveraging this changing environment with infrastructure, technology, and careful planning to turn a climate-driven shift into a competitive edge. The Arctic is no longer just a frozen frontier, it's a high-stakes testing ground where risk and reward collide, setting the stage for a major shift in global trade. The Arctic Express isn't just about geography or politics, it's also a game-changer for economics. Shipping companies make decisions based on time, cost, and risk, and the Arctic route delivers on all three. Take a standard route from Shanghai to Rotterdam via the Suez Canal. It covers over 20,000 kilometers and takes roughly 36 days. Every day on the water adds fuel costs, insurance premiums, and crew expenses. Delays caused by congestion, strikes, or accidents, like the Ever Given blockage in 2021, which cost global trade more than $9 billion per day, can quickly escalate costs. Now compare that to the Arctic Express. The same journey along the Northeast Passage and through the Pacific is about 13,200 kilometers, roughly 8,000 kilometers shorter. Travel time drops to 20 to 25 days, shaving more than 2 weeks off transit. Less distance means lower fuel consumption, fewer emissions, and reduced operating costs. The Arctic route also minimizes congestion and piracy risks. Southern choke points like the Strait of Malacca are crowded and sometimes dangerous. In contrast, the Arctic seas are largely empty, with Russian patrols ensuring security. Fewer delays, fewer threats, and more predictable schedules make it an economically smart option. For companies, the Arctic Express is like switching from a clogged city highway full of tolls and traffic jams to a wide, empty expressway, faster, safer, and cheaper, while also offering a level of reliability that the southern routes simply can't match. The Arctic Express isn't just about saving time or money, it's also a strategic power play. For decades, China has faced what analysts call the Malacca dilemma. Over 60% of its oil imports pass through the Strait of Malacca, a narrow waterway controlled and monitored by U.S. allies. In a crisis, these critical choke points could become a bottleneck, giving the West enormous leverage over China's economy. The Arctic Express changes that calculus. By providing an alternative corridor outside the Western-dominated seas, China and Russia gain independence in moving goods, energy, and critical resources. This isn't merely a commercial benefit, it's strategic autonomy. They can plan, trade, and ship on their own terms, without relying on politically sensitive choke points that could be blocked or disrupted. This corridor also weakens the monopoly the U.S. and its allies have enjoyed over global maritime trade. For the first time in decades, there's a serious, controllable route that bypasses traditional power centers, giving China and Russia a backdoor to global markets. In short, the Arctic Express isn't just a trade shortcut, it's a geopolitical hedge. It allows these nations to protect supply chains, assert independence, and challenge Western dominance, all without firing a single shot. Trade routes are never just about commerce, they're about control. Whoever dominates key shipping lanes can influence the flow of goods, energy, and resources, which is why the U.S. Navy has maintained overwhelming power in the Indo-Pacific for decades. Bases in Singapore, Japan, and the Indian Ocean give the U.S. reach across critical choke points, from the Strait of Malacca to the South China Sea. The Arctic Express flips that dynamic. By moving through the Northeast Passage, China and Russia can operate in a corridor where the U.S. Navy has limited presence. Russia's Northern Fleet, equipped with icebreakers, submarines, and Arctic air bases, provides near-complete control of the region. For China, partnering with Russia in these waters creates a secure, strategic Plan B if southern routes are threatened. This isn't a sudden military offensive, it's a slow-motion maneuver. By controlling Arctic trade lanes, Russia and China are establishing a strategic hedge, a way to move resources, energy, and potentially military supplies without interference from Western forces. Every ship that passes safely through the Arctic reinforces their ability to operate independently, turning commerce into power. In essence, the Arctic Express is both an economic and military strategy, quietly reshaping global influence without a single shot being fired. A route through the Arctic isn't possible without serious technology and infrastructure. These waters are some of the harshest on Earth. Temperatures can drop below -40 degrees Celsius, ice can be thicker than a meter, and storms can appear without warning. To make the Arctic Express viable, China and Russia are investing billions in specialized ships, ports, and navigation systems. China's Zhulong 2, also called Snow Dragon 2, is a prime example. It's a dual-direction icebreaker, capable of plowing through ice up to 1.5 meters thick, equipped with advanced satellite navigation, environmental sensors, and real-time communication systems. Russia is deploying its own fleet, including ARC-7 class polar container ships that can independently navigate ice over 2 meters thick. By 2030, cargo volume along the Northeast Passage is projected to jump from 36 million tons to 270 million tons, a seven-fold increase in just 7 years. Ports like Arkhangelsk are being revitalized, rail and road links upgraded, and Arctic navigation technologies enhanced to ensure year-round reliability. Nuclear-powered icebreakers, smart navigation systems, and satellite monitoring make what once seemed impossible fully operational. This is not theory, it's a real, engineered, high-tech operation. China and Russia are building an entire northern logistics ecosystem, from ships and ports to icebreakers and navigation technology, turning the Arctic from a frozen obstacle into a controlled trade superhighway. The Arctic Express represents one of the boldest moves in modern trade and geopolitics. On the surface, the benefits are clear: faster shipping, shorter distances, fewer choke points, minimal piracy risk, and greater control over supply chains. Economically, it's a potential game changer, saving companies time and money while providing a secure alternative to Western-dominated routes. But the Arctic is unpredictable. Sudden storms, shifting ice, and environmental risks can disrupt even the most carefully planned shipments. Maintaining the route requires billion-dollar investments in icebreakers, ports, and Arctic-capable vessels. Diplomatic tensions with other Arctic nations like Norway, Canada, and the United States add another layer of complexity. For China and Russia, this isn't just about commerce. It's about strategic autonomy and influence. The Arctic Express is a quiet but powerful way to challenge Western dominance, control key trade flows, and create a new northern artery for global commerce. So is the Arctic Express the future of global trade, or a high-stakes gamble on ice? Only time will tell. What's certain is that the world's economic chessboard is being redrawn, with frozen seas becoming the new frontier of power and influence. If you want to follow how the Arctic Silk Road evolves and see how infrastructure continues to shape global power, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for the next deep dive into this unfolding story.